Morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about operating cash and cash flow. So you may be wondering, like, how much money do you need just in your checking or savings account to run, as an owner operator, small trucking company, just trying to keep everything running smoothly. Uh, I found that I typically would feel comfortable running if I had between $10,000 and $20,000 cash available, like same day available. So yeah, you may have, obviously you would have more than that, but can you have access to it on the same day? So uh, you may have, much more in an investment portfolio. For example, my investment portfolio, I've been working on it for many years, and now it's up to $100,000. That's available to me if I need it, but it's not instantaneous. If I had to draw money out of my investment portfolio, um, first it would have to go through a clearinghouse, and then I'd have to transfer it to a checking account. And that could take a day or 2 days or even 3 days to get all those transactions clear. So in the meantime, I have to have money on, like I call on the sideline, or loose change, that I use to run my business from day to day. Because truck repairs will come up, and they could be $1,000, it could be $5,000, it could be $10,000. And it's not like you're going to be able to pull money out of your investment portfolio to cover all these expenses. You wouldn't want to do that, first of all, because that money that you got invested, it needs to stay invested in order to actually perform over time and work and earn compound interest. So you shouldn't really touch that money. Once you invest it, you should not touch that money. Um, but if you had to, for truck repairs, then you have to. I mean, your options are somewhat limited. But I would have $10,000 to $20,000 between checking and savings account are ready to go at all times. Uh, one truck repair could be $10,000. So let's just say, for example, you had $10,000 in your checking account. One truck repair could take it, easily. Then you wouldn't have anything. So you need more than 10, but probably less than 20. Somewhere in that space. Because you're gonna have a required maintenance account, or even a voluntary maintenance account, where you're contributing 18 cents per mile, or additional 5 cents per mile into maintenance accounts on a weekly basis. But those take time to build up. It may take you a year to accumulate $10,000 into a maintenance account. And during that year, you may be taking money out of the maintenance account for your oil changes and all kinds of things for the truck. So I wouldn't count on that maintenance account as my sole source for money available for truck repairs. You need money in addition to that, and the money in addition to that is going to be this $10,000 to $20,000. Now you could have it in a checking account, or you could have it split between a checking and savings account. You may even put some of it in a high yield savings account, which typically would get you 3 or 4% interest on that money. But the idea is that that's the money you would use before you start drawing money out of your investment portfolio. In fact, I wouldn't touch that investment portfolio. In addition to having $10,000 to $20,000 operating cash, you're going to have cash flow. It's typically, for an owner operator at Crete, they're going to be making somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 weekly cash flow coming into your checking account. So you always got to maintain cash flow, and you always need to maintain, that $10,000 to $20,000 availability. In addition to that, I would have my credit cards. Now, I recommend the American Express Business Plum Card. It's a charge card. It's not really a credit card, but it has its limitations. There's times when I went to pay for a truck repair, and I whipped out my American Express card, and the repair shop said, we don't take American Express. My jaw about hit the floor. I'm like, what? I was planning on using that to pay my truck, and it was several $1,000s. And I had the money, thankfully, but I had it split up in two different banks. Um, I had to transfer money from one bank to another bank, so that I had pulled it all together and then made the truck repair. Well, that delayed me another day or so to make that truck repair, to pay for it. But it's one of these things, like I have multiple banks because when you travel in the country, sometimes you run situations where you're in a part of the country, and like if you're in Nebraska, there is no Bank of America in Nebraska. There's no Chase Bank in Nebraska. I think there's one location in Lincoln, you know, and it's small for Chase. Um, Wells Fargo is big in Nebraska. Wells Fargo is big in all the western states, but not Bank of America, not Chase Bank. So I had like multiple bank accounts. I had my money spread out between different bank accounts. Well, in just case I ran somewhere where the card was stolen or lost, or ID theft occurred, and I didn't have all my eggs in one basket. I had options. I had a lot of options. If that card didn't work, I have another bank account I could pull money from. So I had layers and layers of financial ability. And one time I went to pay for a truck repair, and they refused to take American Express, and I had to pull that money together from my different bank accounts into one account so that I could pay for that truck repair. Now, since then, I've gotten the Navy Federal Credit Union Go Biz Visa card, and that had a $25,000 limit, so that covers a lot. But if there's times when I go pay for a truck repair, and if American Express is not accepted, then at least I have the Navy Federal Credit Union Visa. That should work everywhere. But you'll run into situations like that. It's like, for whatever reason, they don't accept that card payment, or your card gets declined. You know, Sometimes banks do crazy things. You're making truck repair, payments of several thousands to $10,000, and your bank thinks that's kind of like a fraud. So first thing they do is freeze your card. And you gotta call them, and I mean they'll send you a text message, and they want to verify that you know uh, you never know. When it comes to paying for truck repairs, you want to have that ability to do it. You don't want to be like this guy that last night. He called for a mobile mechanic. I get to the customer. There's three cop cars, a tow truck, and a mobile mechanic. The guy can't pay for the mobile mechanic. He had some kind of problem paying. So you don't want to be in that boat. So I found over the years that it's always best to have plenty of cash. I know that's somewhat difficult for guys to have that much money, because their temptation is to spend it or invest it. But you need to have it available to you, because you're traveling the country, and you may end up putting your truck in some oddball shop, because you're in some remote area, and like they're the only one available, and they don't take American Express, and you're like, crap, man, this thing is $7,000 and I gotta pay. So what are you gonna do? You know, uh, the guy wants his money, and you're like, well, hold on a second, I gotta move money around. That's not really fair to the guy who did the work. He's already done the work. He's ready to be paid. He's got to pay bills too. He can't he can't sit there and say, okay, you pay me in 2 weeks. He wants payment right away. So you got to think about this, strategically, How are you going to run your operation? How can you run a smooth operation? Well, one of the ways is you always make sure you got enough cash if something comes up. And it's hard to keep your money. You look at it every day and you're like, I just got $10,000 sitting there. I can't touch it. I don't touch it because I don't know if I'm going to get through the day without any truck repairs. I could have $10,000 to $20,000 between checking and savings or high yield savings account that I'm not touching. That's there for me to pay. So I don't rely on them credit cards. I prefer to use my American Express Business Plum card, but if that sucker gets declined, I still have to pay. So and I don't want to touch my investment portfolio. Now, if you really needed to, you could try to get a personal loan, but even then, that's going to take time. That doesn't happen overnight. You don't get, when you apply for a personal loan, that could take 3 to 5 business days to come get through. So you don't want to rely on personal loans, and you may not even get approved. So don't assume you're going to get approved for a loan. Now, if you have a credit score like mine, which is over 800, odds are you're going to get approved. But if your credit score is less than stellar, you may not get approved. So I wouldn't count on getting a loan. I wouldn't count on them credit cards working every time. The best strategy is make sure you have enough cash, operating cash, that you can run your business smoothly, that you can pay for truck repairs as they occur. Don't count on that warranty. I mean, the warranty is good. The Daimler Freightliner EM4 warranty is good, but it doesn't cover everything. If you crack a radiator, it's not under warranty. That's $5,000 plus tow truck. That's another $1,000. So you'll have $6,000 right out the door within 24 hours. So you gotta have, I wouldn't run unless I had $10,000 cash available at my fingertips, preferably as much as 20,000, and then the rest of it I would have invested. But you don't have a crystal ball. You can't guarantee that your truck isn't going to break down and that it's not going to be expensive. It could be. You're in California, it could be very expensive. If you're in Utah, it may be less expensive. You're in Texas, you may have to wait a week. You got to have that money. There's no getting around it. So this is part of the game of playing the game of being an owner-operator. Part of the game is having the money to play the game. If you don't have the money, you can't really play the game. And, you get yourself in a lot of trouble very, very quickly when it comes to truck repairs and you don't have the ability to pay. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.